Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today I am covering the Prologue. So I think there's some humor to be found that in the last chapter I was talking about how many characters we were introduced to, how many world-building elements, how many names, and it's seeming to run counter to this common recommendation I keep seeing in lectures and books and videos about starting your book off in an active scene without too many characters to really get your readers hooked. And here we are. I know that Ravens was added later, so the prologue here, I guess, I imagine in some circles is probably considered the real first chapter, or the true first chapter. I don't know. I'm not a part of any Wheel of Time group, so do please let me know what the general consensus is on the Ravens chapter. But this prologue certainly fell more in line with the advice that I tend to hear when it comes to first chapters. Going through the first paragraph, there's a lot of scenery description, and it's beautifully done. One of the things that I get throughout this entire chapter is there seems to be a lot of very heightened language to the prose. In that way, I think it's not quite so similar to Sanderson. At least in this chapter, Sanderson is much more direct. This is much more evocative, I think. And I think I've heard it said somewhere, for the life of me I don't remember, but I think I've heard that Robert Jordan has a specific style to the way he writes his chapters, in which he starts off with a fairly lengthy setting description, and then it gets into the character. For the life of me, I cannot remember where I heard that, but it is certainly ringing true thus far, in this chapter at least. He sets a very eerie tone. We're at a palace, and something horrible has clearly just happened. It would be an otherwise gorgeous palace with marble, friezes, and so on. But there's dirt and dead lying everywhere, and the palace is shaking. And then we get the name for the POV, Luz Theron Telamon, and he's calling out for his love, Ilyena. And this is ultimately that prologue chapter I remember having listened to. Not the whole thing when I listened to it, but this intro I certainly do remember from the part that I did listen to. And it's interesting. I bring that up to highlight that when I first tried to listen to the audiobook, I didn't know who Luz Theron Telamon was. So I remember thinking, okay, this guy is clearly deranged or not in his right mind, and clearly that does end up playing out. He's not. But going into this chapter now, actually reading it, and with the knowledge from the Ravens chapter that Luz Theron is the dragon and that he, according to myth, betrayed everyone, it made me very interested in this guy in a different way. It was interesting context added. So Luz Theron is calling for Ilyena, and he is sort of wandering these halls. Robert Jordan describes a particular corpse near him as he calls out Ilyena, and you can sort of gather that that's her there. And nothing seems capable of holding on to Luz Theron's attention. He does start to rub a symbol on his coat, or his cloak, rather. A circle half white and half black, the colors separated by a sinuous line. I took note of that. I thought of the yin and yang symbol, and I kind of presumed it would be a similar thing here. We know that Luz Theron was the dragon who fought on the side of light, and we know from the Ravens chapter that there is the Dark One. So those were some things that flowed through my mind as I was reading that. As he's wandering around and looking at himself in a mirror, he entertains himself. It's like he's under some sort of spell or some kind that is messing with his mind, and someone teleports in. Robert Jordan narrated it much better than I did. Behind him, the air rippled, shimmered, solidified into a man who looked around. his mouth twisting briefly with distaste. And he's a guy wearing all black. So, because he's wearing all black, one of the first things I considered was that he was the Dark One. He calls Lews Therin the Lord of the Morning, and Lews Therin doesn't know who this person is. He invites him to dinner. The man says, "Shaitan take you. Does the taint already have you so far in its grip?" That's when I figured, no, this is not the Dark One. Because why would the Dark One exclaim his own name in that way? And it's just as well, because for all of Lews Therin's inability to concentrate or focus on anything, he hears that name and he shudders and he says, "You mustn't say that name. It is dangerous." So I presume that Shaitan is the Dark One at this point. This man in black is a bit frustrated. He seems to have come to want to torture this guy before he kills him, or if he even wants to do that. He might not. He may just derive whatever satisfaction he can from the torture itself, with less care for actually killing him. He seems to consider the madness that has overtaken Lews Therin as a reprieve from the tragedy around him, and he wants him to know that he has lost. That kind of thing. General supervillain evil stuff going on. And the man in black introduces himself as Elon Morin Tedranai, which Lews Therin remembers, and he calls him the Betrayer of Hope. So the name Betrayer, certainly Betrayer of Hope, there's a distinction between light and hope, I suppose, although perhaps connected in many ways. Elon claims to embrace the name, and he says that after today, men will call Lews Therin Kinslayer. So we're slowly building this picture of what happened here. Lews Therin is still talking about his wife, wondering where she is. And we get more monologuing from Elon. We're getting a little bit of history of Lews Therin's deeds. "Once you stood first among the servants. Once you wore the ring of Tamerlane and sat in the high seat. Once you summoned the 9 rods of dominion. Now look at you, a pitiful, shattered wretch. But it is not enough. You humbled me in the hall of servants. You defeated me at the gates of Parandisen. But I am the greater now. I will not let you die without knowing that. When you die, your last thought will be with the full knowledge of your defeat, of how complete and utter it is, if I let you die at all." A lot of names there, lots of titles, lots of deeds. I'm wondering if any of these are going to reoccur with the Dragon Reborn. Because one of the big things we get throughout this chapter is the bit of knowledge that this battle between them, it's hard to tell if Lews Therin's battle is with Elon or the Dark One. Because I don't think Lews Therin is on the level of the Dark One. Like, Lews Therin is a guy, as far as I can tell. He's not an angel or a god. So I'm curious to know, especially considering the heightened language and the very high-minded elements at play, what I would like to know what more details there are to know, so I can sort of ground some of what I'm being told. I'm also curious to know, with the next turning of the wheel, it's my understanding that Lews Therin Telemann is the last turning, and this new one with the new Dragon Reborn is going to be a new turning. I'm not expecting several turns in the book series. I'm expecting that the whole book series encompasses one specific turn. So Elon sets about Bunny Ears healing Lews Therin because he wants him to be cognizant of his defeat and suffer in that way. But he says, "But even one of them could only give you a few lucid minutes if you did not destroy her first. What I can do will serve as well for my purposes. But I fear Shaitan's healing is different from the sort you know. Be healed, Lews Therin." And essentially what he does is something extremely painful. So painful, it at first feels like 1,000 years of torture, and then another 1,000 years of torture. Or rather, it takes 1,000 years of pain and then 1,000 years to get over that pain. And once he is of his right mind again, he looks around, he sees the destruction, he sees the body that was referenced earlier when he was asking where Ilyena went to, and that body is in fact Ilyena. And Elon offers to give her back. He says that the great Lord of the Dark can make her live again if you will serve him, if you will serve me. And first off, don't trust that, Lews Therin. But second, because we're learning about so many turnings of the wheel, I'm wondering what victory would look like for one side or the other. Because how much autonomy does anyone have if we're all slaves to the cycle? And I wonder if the pathway toward victory for one side or the other is to work them to the other side. So if you can make the dragon evil, will that end the cycle? Or if you can make Elon good, could that end the cycle? And I don't think so, because the Dark One is there, above him. Elon seems to be just a servant, although a very powerful one. So Lews Therin says, 10 years, betrayer. 10 years your foul master has wrecked the world, and now this. And Elon says, 10 years, you pitiful fool. This war has not lasted 10 years, but since the beginning of time. You and I have fought 1,000 battles with the turning of the wheel, 1,000 times 1,000, and we will fight until times die and the shadow is triumphant. What stuck out to me about that segment was, did Lews Therin not know this? He is the dragon. I guess he's been battling these guys for 10 years, and then I have questions there insofar as, is it, like, what happened 10 years ago? Was the Dark One just incapable of being in the world? Did someone... I imagine the Dark One is an ever-present thing. I mean, did they just discover Lews Therin as the dragon 10 years ago, so that's when he started fighting? And as I said at sort of the beginning of this little moment here for this segment, is this not something that Lews Therin knows? That's the big thing that I would like to know. Because obviously, from a meta perspective, there's an element here of this is Robert Jordan explaining this to us, the reader. So I accept that as part of it. Lews Therin thinks that this is Elon's doing, and Elon tells him to remember. He says, "Remember, you fool. Remember your futile attack on the great Lord of the Dark. Remember his counterstroke. Remember, even now the 100 companions are tearing the world apart, and every day 100 men more join them. What hand slew Ilyena Sunhair, Kinslayer? Not mine. Not mine. What hand struck down every life that bore a drop of your blood? Everyone who loved you. Everyone you loved. Not mine, Kinslayer. Not mine. Remember and know the price of opposing Shaitan." So more or less what we reading can clue into is this was all done by Lews Therin's hand. He remembers and he wails in agony. And I wonder, first off, I want to know more about this counterstroke, but how accountable is Lews Therin if he was charmed, or if he was made mad, or if someone took control of him, if he's not in his right mind? The insanity plea. Obviously, we know it's going to go down in history as he is the betrayer, but is he morally culpable? I really don't think I have enough information here specifically on what made him do it, but it's clear that he didn't know he did it, and it's clear he feels tremendous guilt and remorse for it, which I suppose you would expect someone of good moral character to feel, even if they weren't truly responsible. And I bring this up in part because near the end of the chapter, he starts begging for forgiveness from the light, and he's not expecting it to come. I'm inclined to grant some leniency, at least, if he was essentially incapacitated for the process. It all comes down to how much autonomy he had. Did he make a choice to do this? So as he's wailing, the betrayer is laughing, and we get a segment that I underlined here. He could not bear the faces, the pain. He could not bear to remain any longer. Desperately, he reached out to the true source, to tainted Sidin, and he traveled. So, true source and to tainted Sidin. What is Sidin, and why is it tainted? I think a little later on, we get something. He teleports away, saying, light, forgive me, light, forgive me. He says he was still touching Sidin, the male half of the power that drove the universe, that turned the wheel of time, and he could feel the oily taint fouling its surface, the taint of the shadow's counterstroke, the taint that doomed the world. So that strikes me as the Dark One got a really, really good hit in, possibly enough to upset the balance. And again, if the well is poisoned, how does one purify it? And I wonder if that's kind of what happens at the end of this chapter. Because for the longest time, I was sitting thinking, what did I just read? He sets off a nuke, clearly. Was that an attempt to cleanse the taint? I'm not so sure. I really don't know. This idea that the wheel is tainted is concerning, and it's the male half. And that suggests that there is a female half. Again, gender dynamics are going to be a big thing in this book, I'm sure. And building on the gender dynamics element at play here, I think there's this idea, this common idea that of the hunter-gatherer type thing with men as being dangerous or having this danger to them, and women being the nurturers. So if in men there is this inherent danger, I'm wondering how that could connect to this foul taint. And then I think of an anime I watched when I was much younger called Wolf's Rain, which is about a pack of wolves that are essentially looking for paradise at the end of the world. And if I recall correctly, the idea of the show is that paradise needs to have a drop of evil or a drop of corruption in it for balance and for allowing us to appreciate the good meaningfully. So maybe this taint isn't as bad as one might necessarily think. There's a lot going on, and I'm still very early on. So then he basically detonates a nuke with himself as the nuke. He draws on the true source, and he's begging the light for forgiveness. He doesn't think he can get it. And there's a giant sky beam from the sky to the center of the earth. He explodes, and what comes out of all of that is a giant mountain with like flowing lava. And Alon pops up on a little island between some river flow, and he says, "You cannot escape so easily, dragon. It is not done between us. It will not be done until the end of time." And I'm wondering, is it, forgive me, I don't remember if I've said it in this episode yet or not. I'm wondering if the Dragon Reborn will be fighting Alon specifically, or someone who takes Alon's place. That role in the mythology, in the turning of the wheel. And then maybe I consider the possibility that Alon has all past memories, because I do know that genetic memory is going to be a thing. So we'll see. Very exciting chapter. It's not quite done. There are 2 passages written from books, authors from the 4th Age. "And the shadow fell upon the land, and the world was riven stone from stone. The oceans fled, and the mountains were swallowed up, and the nations were scattered to the 8 corners of the world. The moon was as blood, and the sun was as ashes. The seas boiled, and the living envied the dead. All was shattered, and all but memory lost, and one memory above all others, of him who brought the shadow and the breaking of the world, and him they named Dragon." That's the first. The other is, "And it came to pass in those days, as it had come before and would come again, that the dark lay heavy on the land and weighed down the hearts of men, and the green things failed, and hope died, And men cried out to the Creator, saying, O light of the heavens, light of the world, let the promised one be born of the mountain, according to the prophecies, as he was in ages past and will be in ages to come. Let the Prince of the Morning sing to the land, that green things will grow, and the valleys give forth lambs. Let the arm of the Lord of the dawn shelter us from the dark, and the great sword of justice defend us. Let the dragon ride again on the winds of time. So even though it has gone down in history that the dragon did some not good things, they're still praying for the dragon to be reborn, to come back and save them. And it sounds like after whatever it was Lews Therin did, the Dark One reigned for a time, or bad things happened. Again, like now my current going theory is that Lews Therin was trying to rid the wheel of the taint, or the power of the taint. Yeah. Very exciting chapter. As I said, it's very evocative language, very stylized, very heightened in some of these topics. I hope we'll get I want to ramp up to the heightened, high-minded, lofty topics. Like I would like to start in a slightly more grounded place so I can, plant my feet a bit more firmly, but I like the characters. I get Good Omen vibes a little bit from the two, although I think in Good Omens, which I'm not super familiar with, the angel and the devil are friends. So this certainly seems more meaningfully adversarial than Good Omens. Nevertheless, we've got these ageless beings on opposite sides. I think that's all I got for now. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.